In this video, I will introduce issues in digital archives that can make us vulnerable to misinformation. By the end of this video, viewers will be able to recall that traditional archives are inherently biased, infer that these biases are reflected in digital archives, and recognize these archival practices as a vulnerability. And you'll be able to do all of these things in order to apply research skills to avoid misinformation. First, we're going to need to establish some concepts about traditional archives that may surprise you, specifically the idea that archives are unbiased. For centuries, archivists functioned as gatekeepers with the self-prescribed notion that they were just holding the original documents for others to seek to understand and interpret. However, it is important to understand that archival collections are developed by people who, just like all other people, have implicit and explicit biases that can limit how they perceive these documents. Historically, especially in the United States, archivists have been white, male, wealthy, educated, and Christian, and there is an abundance of recent research to posit that these ideals are inherently present within most archival collections, creating an air of inherent bias and systemic racism. Ultimately, archives can't keep everything, so decisions have to be made at some point. There are several ways that these biases can manifest themselves, including within the actual item, within the decisions that were made to include or exclude items in the collection, within the description and contextualization of the item, and within the policies that govern access to the items. It's important to be aware of these biases when approaching archival research. Turning a blind eye can result in misinterpretation of an item, lack of appropriate historical context in your research, and potentially harmful perpetuation of prejudiced ideals. It is also important to realize the impact of the materials and perspectives that are not in the collections. The voices and stories of marginalized groups are often underrepresented or altogether absent from archival collections. We call this erasure or symbolic annihilation. Returning to the idea of key vulnerabilities to misinformation, the main vulnerability exemplified here is systemic racism or social stratification. The othering and erasure of diverse voices in archives can keep perspectives narrow. This is important to consider because archives are memory institutions, and there is literature to support a phenomenon called the continued influence effect, where memory affects later inferences. A secondary vulnerability in this case would be the evaluative skills it takes to recognize this and contextualize the documents in your research. Now that you have an understanding of some of the subtle and not so subtle ways in which traditional archives are biased and reflect systemic racism, let's apply that to digital archives. Research supports that digital environments such as the internet and social media reflect social issues that exist in real life. Therefore, we can infer that these biases and racist ideals exist in digital versions of these archives as well. I can demonstrate this by conducting an archival search. Hiram Whittle was the first black man to gain admission to the University of Maryland in 1951. This is a major historical event in campus history, so one might think that the university archives would have quite a bit of material about Whittle, right? Unfortunately, you would be incorrect. To start, I'll start by conducting a search for Hiram Whittle in the archival collections to see what physical documents we may be able to look at. As you can see, this search generates 0 results. See what happens when we search the digital collections. I'll navigate over to the digital collections page and type in Hiram Whittle. And we'll see that the digital collections are contained in 3 different repositories, so we'll see results to each. In the legacy repository, we see only 2 results, and then in the audiovisual repository, we have 0 results again. But in the middle, we do have the new repository with 198 results. However, when we go to look at those results, we will see that the generated results contain the keywords Hiram or Whittle, and that most of these probably don't have anything to do with Hiram Whittle at all. Let's go back and check out the legacy repository results. There is a photo of Whittle with his dorm mates, all white men. Now let's go back, and this other option is the minutes of the special meeting of the Board of Regents regarding the admission of Whittle to the School of Engineering. There is quite a bit of context that we can pull from this, such as the use of inappropriate terminology to describe Whittle's race, and the mention of quote unquote separate but equal facilities and education. And this is all we have about this should be important historical figure in campus history. Once again, the key vulnerability in this case is systemic racism or social stratification. Whittle barely exists in the context of UMD's campus history, and the documents that do exist exemplify the whiteness of campus culture in 1951 and campus in general. Secondary vulnerabilities include evaluation skills, because one would need to develop skills beyond a basic level to evaluate these results and would certainly need to conduct other research to contextualize. And now that we've moved into a digital environment, we can also identify a third vulnerability in online structures. The way that these results were generated and presented created barriers and confusion that a new archival researcher may not understand. We'll cover more on this later. Luckily, there are skills that you can develop in practice to help you navigate these vulnerabilities. To start with, we'll look at social stratification. Now you should be able to recall that traditional archives are inherently biased. So, what skills can help you to navigate this vulnerability in traditional and digital archival research? In itself, understanding that archives are inherently biased is a huge step in skill building for archival research. Background research is another skill that can help. Start by gathering information from the library or even Google to build a framework for your subject. Some questions you can ask may include: what do you know about your subject? When were they born? What was their background? What was happening at the time that may impact the results you find? Research about collections you may want to explore can also be helpful. Does this archive have material that answer questions about your research topic? Who created the materials and who were they meant for? Now that you've done some background research, you may want to begin searching archival collections for material. The search process for archives is an iterative one, and you may need to take careful notes about keywords and phrases that you've used. Think outside the box when generating keywords, keeping in mind that people from different perspectives may use different language to describe items, including the archivist who processed the collection. There are many other ways to assess bias in the archives, which can be addressed in our Bias in the Archives video, which you can find in the description below. Now let's take a look at our second vulnerability, evaluation skills. What are some evaluation skills that can help you when conducting archival research? Once again, everything you just learned about acknowledging bias in the archives is an evaluative skill in and of itself. This will allow you to evaluate the archive and its collections to build context for your research and assess whether it may or may not be beneficial to you. Another evaluative skill is to gather your bearings. Take a look at the descriptions and research guides at the archive you want to work with and compare this to other similar collections and archives. Would another archive possibly have more materials on your subject? Are the collections more diverse and inclusive? Now is also a good time to examine your own biases. How does your lived experience impact the way you look at material? Will some of the material you're interested in be triggering for you? Another thing to be aware of is library anxiety. You don't have to evaluate everything on your own. Talk to subject specialists or curators at the archive you want to work with. Many archives employ archivists that are experts in specific collecting areas. They're there to help you produce the best research possible and will be happy to chat with you about your topic and make suggestions for you. And that brings us to our third vulnerability, online structures. Understanding more about how information can be presented to you online is another important skill to build in archival research and research in general. This section will just scratch the surface on some techniques you can incorporate in your searches that may be helpful. Keep in mind that there are entire books and courses on this subject if you are interested. Search results can be displayed in a variety of ways, and it's important to refine your search skills to produce quality research. It's important to know that just because a search result is first on a page does not mean that it is the best result for you. Now that we've worked on some evaluative skills, using a thing we called click restraint or scanning through the search results for a bit first to evaluate the relevance could be very helpful. Depending on the site, you may also be able to filter your results by using additional criteria. For more basic information on this, click on the link to our Searching Archival Collections video in the description below. You may recall earlier when we searched UMD's digital collections for Hiram Whittle that the results in the new repository did not appear to be about Hiram Whittle at all. This is because search engines may search for results with the words Hiram or Whittle instead of both. This requires a search skill referred to as Boolean logic, and one solution is to search Hiram and, all caps, A and D, Whittle, to generate results that do contain both keywords. Another option is to put quotations around your search phrase so that the search produces results in which the keywords appear contiguously. These are particularly helpful if your original search produced an overwhelming number of results. Research also supports the fact that design impacts how we process information. Taking a moment to evaluate how the results are presented to you can help you figure out how you want to approach them. If you're familiar with Google, results are generated in a hierarchy which is predetermined by algorithms that come with their own slew of literature and concerns. This reiterates that the top result may not be the best result. Many libraries use what is called a bento box to display search results, which is what you saw in our search of digital collections earlier. It is used to categorize results based on criteria that the library has chosen. Taking a moment to figure out what the criteria is can help you to decide where you want to start looking. This video just scratches the surface on broad vulnerabilities to misinformation in archives and what actions we can take to avoid it, but hopefully it's a start. To recap, we learned that traditional archives are inherently biased, that these biases have transferred into digital archives, and that these archival practices can make us vulnerable to misinformation in archival research. For more help with archival research, be sure to explore the other tutorials.